Aquatic Technical Swimming Committee, the chair, Mr. J. Thomas, who is trying to get in but hasn't been able to get in, and Mr. Raul Araya, who is put together this entire webinar with Mr. Orlando for all of you.
Would you allow Marisa to make a draft summary of this? Marisa, would you like to? Okay.
Goes. This is the first one.
Esta es la primera de una serie. Esperamos tener estas oportunidades virtuales de desarrollo para los entrenadores de la natación en lo que sigue.
Pleased to see the amount of people that signed up. So please make sure you tell all of your coach friends about this, and together we can ensure that the coaches level in the Americas is going to be strong moving forward. So enjoy it. Orlando will have incredible information to share with you. Gracias, Orlando, por todo tu trabajo. Thank you, Raúl. Gracias, and enjoy the evening.
Muchas gracias, Maureen. Y como decíamos, bueno, mientras vemos que sucesivamente ingresan colegas de la natación.
As we see the colleagues from all Americas, I'd like to tell you that Orlando Moccagatta, our presenter today, is a trainer with more than 30 years experience. He has been a trainer for the selection of Argentina for many years, national director for sports, and also for all swimming in Latin America. And of course, all of his titles, his trajectory, and in the swimming schools and motor skills with the development of the training of athletes. He has been a trainer of Jose Melans, the world champion in 50 freestyle in 2002, when the speed was dominated by the Russian Popov and other swimmers at that level. He's had many, many medals with Jose Melans and other athletes in Pan American Games. And with all this presentation, and it's a pleasure now to give the microphone to Orlando. And remember that the chat won't be working, but all questions can be made in the question and answers box, and we will be answering those questions one by one. We will have 2 blocks of 45 minutes each with a break in between. So please go ahead with all your questions in that box. Welcome once again. Thank you so much for being here. And Orlando, good evening to all. Thank you, Maureen, for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here today. Thank you, Raúl, for the invitation. Thank you to all of the Panama Aquatics family for the great work that you've been doing for swimming in the Americas. And well, thank you, Raúl, also for this presentation. And without any further ado, we will begin, because so that time is enough for us. Hopefully you're seeing the screen now. Good. So our topic today, which calls us here together, is developing the aquatic styles and skills and the basis for future swimmers. On this theme, I'm working in Lima. I'm the head coach for the Regatas Club after having been, as Raúl said, 20 years in Argentina, 22 and then 6 and 7 in Peru. And I have worked in clubs all my life. I am passionate for long-term process work. And I really love high performance and training. And this is what I live and breathe. I understand that the development of swimmers for the long term is what really a trainer, a head coach, must consider as a macro vision in order to be able to guide the different stages in the face of sports results and performance looking towards the future. I specifically work a lot in academia, professors, and pre-puberty trainers and teachers, coaches with my own team for youth and adult swimmers, so that everybody can share a vision of swimming seen as an entire movie, not as separate photographs, but as a movie with a continuity where all of the work of the team is woven together in accordance with our own common goals. I'd like to then start this presentation establishing what would be the approach for these teaching processes and were the cycles in the life of a swimmer to precisely be able to focus on the development of aquatic skills, which later on will bring us to a diversification or distinguishing of training in order to train athletes for high performance in sports. The cycles, life cycles of these swimmers are a learning stage, a training stage, which is between 8 and 12 years, a development where load grows by 40%, 50%. And this gives us an idea that this development and training stage contents then are given in a progressive manner and are linked to biological maturity in high performance. Obviously, the paradigm in planning for sports success and in master sports, as all of us know, this is an extraordinary current which is being seen in a stronger manner throughout the world. So coaches should have in mind that growing older is a variable on which this methodology rests and is developed. So the life cycles of swimmers today extend from a child, which has early training at a year, let's say, to an athlete in world champions or masters championships. And this within the framework of swimming as an extraordinary sport, extraordinarily tied to interpersonal relations and also linked to preventive processes for health matters in the training and development stage, which is where we most strongly, with most continuity, this is where coaches work. And this is for 3 stages we have here. Cognitive development related to this pre-puberty stage, then conditional development, which happens in the puberty stage of development, and competitive development, which is the post-puberty development stage. When the swimmer stops growing, then we can begin with a high performance in sports. With respect to this stage, it's very important to link and relate these processes, sports training processes, to these teaching processes. The swimming school or swimming academy must be planned and controlled by the lead coaches in order to ensure that all of the teaching and methodology processes have a consequence and are based on the learning of swimming from a sports perspective. This does not mean that we eliminate contexts in, let's say, class dynamics, or what could be a lot of fun and enjoyable and as swimming lessons should be. But the contents should be focused on the development of sports technique. Nobody can ensure that the swimmer will be an elite swimmer, but we must give all swimmers, our students, the opportunity to learn how to swim well. If they are not elite athletes, they will be athletes who will be enjoying swimming for their health and well-being. Therefore, the swimming academy, swimming school is a very important starting point of entry so that our students can learn to swim well and can love swimming. These two challenges will be what the young professors who are teaching in swimming schools and academies, they can be looking at these goals and stages.
If you go down to the bottom to your right, check for the interpretation box and you will get the interpretation in Spanish. Thank you.
So, interpretation in English at the end.
Y nos piden el parte en inglés, así que ya está informándose que hay un box abajo a la derecha a esos fines. Perdón, adelante.
Muy bien.
Okay, so let's go ahead then. Looking at the cycles in the life of a swimmer, we were speaking of a first stage, the learning stage, where the paradigm for planning is the didactic or teaching paradigm. The second stage, which is the sports development stage between 6 and 12 years, follows development, maturity, and growth of the swimmer, where the paradigm is a dialectic paradigm, an interrelationship between the biological growth and the principles of training and methodology. And the high performance stages, where the paradigms are planning those great goals and objectives. So now the movement that has had most emphasis lately is masters sports, where the planning paradigm is not only sports oriented, but also contributing to the health and social interaction of our swimmers. When we speak of the didactic paradigm, these are the teaching strategies. In what way can a professor be able to teach students to swim? Here, there's a phrase by Sweet Enham that says that a swimmer must learn, must want to return, and must feel safe and comfortable in the class. And these three factors and index develop the quality and can distinguish the quality of our professors. The dialectic paradigm, the training and development. Here, methodology is a product of the interaction between biological laws and the training principles, the biological laws of maturity, development, and growth, and the principles of training, which are planning, which will guarantee long-term processes, and the principle of load progressing, which means that gradually we will be increasing the load in quality and quantity, and specialization, progressive specialization for training content. What will result from biological laws, which we could synthesize in maturity and training principles. This gives way to different methodologies for each of the stages. So we reach the paradigm for the great objectives or grand goals, which means training to win. An integrated paradigm for master sports would be the paradigm for social interaction, preventive action, and sports. Today, there is a higher need to belong to groups, to healthy groups, and therefore the trainers for master swimmers must make sure that the training contents are working in favor of these health processes and thinking about growing old, which is part of human life and therefore part of the methodology of training. With respect to the training and development stage, we speak of three different stages. One is cognitive development, which has to do with technical development. And this is in the pre-puberty stage. It is the hydrodynamic and coordination technique, which we will look at. Conditional development, that's physical condition development that we do in the puberty period, which a higher progressive endocrinal maturity. And now we go into the propulsion or propelling technique, better pushing. And in competitive development technique in the post-puberty, this technique will be linked to competitive specialization. In cognitive development, this is between 7 and 10 years old. We know that there's a difference also between boys and girls at this stage. There's also a difference between ethnic groups here. We know that in determined parts of the planet, human beings develop and mature before or after others, but we will be taking then, let's say, a standard mean, and we will place cognitive development between 7 and 10 years for this. And this is marked by the immaturity of systems, organ body systems. The only system which is completely mature is the nervous system at this point. So this is the time for techniques and styles, learning subaquatic, which is the first style, let's say, and the learning after this of more advanced techniques. In this stage, the position of the body is a reference to aerodynamics, dynamics. This is very important in training contents and coordination and technical models. At this moment, we have long-term athlete development, which is what we know as training to learn. Training to train and training then to compete, training then to win later. But these are the first two stages, long-term athlete development, which is training to learn and learning to train. A new message for all those who have come in right now. In the questions and answers box, you can write down your questions there. We have a few questions already. We will be answering when we close this first stage, unless these are specifically about topics.
Have entered to the conversation recently. You have a box to your bottom right, interpretation, where you have this clinic in English language. And also all these slides will be sent as well after tomorrow in English. Gracias, Tato. Estábamos entonces en estas tres etapas.
So in these three stages, then, we were talking about cognitive development, which is technical development, conditional development, where technique acquires a different feature, but we're still working on technique. And then competitive development, where contents are enriched in training through progressive technique. So I'm a trainer who permanently works with technique. For me, technique is the heart of teaching. For me, it's fundamental for coaches to understand that not everything is method. Of course, load progression, etc., all that is, I share the importance of that. But the content of training should also go through having a great cognitive, a great technical content. So this is why this is so important now, which in long-term athletes development, we call training to learn and learning to train. So what is the point of entry for the cognitive? They should know, of course, our swimmers should know for entry, etc., and swimming and turning and exit. So what we should think about is that the diploma of academics is to swim the 4 styles learn the start, the finish, the turns correctly when we pass these stages, which is training to learn. When we have surpassed this stage, then the purpose of the coach should be to learn to swim well at different speeds, at a short, higher speeds, more controlled speeds, longer, and all of the skills will come from the drills and development drills in training. When we learn to train, the endocrine system is still immature. And therefore, what I would suggest at this point is for all of the training contents here to be related with technical content. Technique should be the variable that distinguishes. If my series of trainings makes my swimmers to not be able to breathe bilaterally or not kick as he should, or the stroke becomes shorter, then this means that the series I've chosen for training is either too intense, too routinary, or the stops or the rests are not enough, or the intensity is not correct, or altogether. Therefore, if the technique is not held, is not strong, then we must think about a different series for training series. Because at this age, it's very important to develop different speeds, but on a base of this cognitive development. In a second stage, which is conditional development, the endocrine maturity of the body becomes apparent, of course, in the primary and secondary skills. There's, of course, the features, the primary and secondary features of the genders means that we are reaching the endocrine maturity. And here technique becomes to be enriched with a greater strength, greater resistance, greater speed. The development of the physical cognition then gradually becomes more important in this phase. We are now in the puberty stage, and technique is now no longer based on hydrodynamics and now is more focused on pushing, propelling, propulsion. We know that the efficiency of swimmers is based on resistance and drag, a minor drag, not as endurance, but a drag, reducing drag, and greater propulsion or push. So in cognitive development, we'll be working with hydrodynamics, greater hydrodynamics, which will bring us to better resistance to water, reduced resistance to water, but in conditional development with the maturity of the organs and systems, we have content related to strength, speed, flexibility. Now we begin to develop propulsion, reducing drag. We are now receiving a few questions. I think we will be able to answer them in about 20 minutes when we close this first stage. We will also be trying to be working slowly so that Marisa, our translator, who are following this in English, this webinar in English, so that they can also be able to be listening in English and receive the English language on time. But there is a question here, which hopefully later you can answer, Orlando, later on, when you speak about these aspects. But it seemed to me very important with respect to bilateral breathing. Is it really necessary, mandatory for swimmers? What's the value of bilateral breathing? Hopefully we'll see this later on, but also programming after 4 years old in physical education classes. I think there's always a lot of issues about how should we face these swimming processes in schools where maybe they have less hours necessary, which are available, as maybe in private schools where they have more hours available. So if you want to speak about this now or later, I understand that there are two key elements in developing technique. One is balance and symmetry. Balance and symmetry. And in this sense, bilateral breathing, it contributes, of course, to an improvement, let's say, in resistance through hypoxia and breathing every 3 strokes, let's say. But the benefit, if exact precise benefit, is in the balance of style and homogeneous and symmetrical development of both hemispheres. That is the benefit. But of course, with respect, whoever considers this as a different way. As Bill Sweetenham said, he remarked on classes, but at the beginning, when many times as coaches, we immediately focus on prematurely, we put in loads in training, in the functional areas, where we actually should be completing this process of techniques and skills that you speak of. But this Australian coach said, let's look at Olympic championships. There are different styles, different techniques, but there's not one swimmer who swims technically, let's say, poorly. In a final in the Olympics, all 8 swimmers swim well, even if they have different styles. Once in a cup in Berlin, the 8 finalists had 8 different styles we saw in that final, in the breaststroke. But what's important here, what are the movement nuclei, the movement focuses, on which later on the different contents, we will diversify the swimmers. And then in a competitive stage, technique can be adjusted to the different strategic needs. 2,500 meters today, for example, Chu, he is a swimmer that plays with his kick. He's a swimmer that plays with his style. And he can go from, let's say, journey to party, as Hamilton says in Formula One, to speed in just 1 second. This technical mastery is learned from before. Altrinieri is an extraordinary swimmer that I really admire, and he is able, through his extraordinary talent and work by his coaches, he can come to be such a champion, but cannot go from just one style. 4x4. He's like a 4x4, and he's a Ferrari. And so I admire him. I am not speaking poorly of him. What I'm saying is that he is a swimmer, but when they're younger ages, swimmers should be versatile and then choose the style they want. I can learn 6 kicks, but then I decide on 2. But if I only learn 2 kicks, then I can't go on to 6 later on. So in breaststroke or in butterfly, I should learn those 6 types of kicks to then see if my style when I'm a high performance will be 2. I'll choose the 2. So with respect to swimming academies, I understand that the development of this balance, of this laterality, which are 2 contents which have to do with neuroscience and psychometricity, they are the basis of a pedagogical current oriented towards balance and symmetry. So these are the contents that a head coach should be tying into their school academy. So the contents of the swimming academy should be related to what we will be needing in a high performance athlete later on. Of course, they're the same for all swimmers, but the movement focuses. The basic contents will diversify, and that taxonomic scale will then must be very clear to those who are leading the processes for swimming in the swimming academy. So, sorry, because I sometimes speak very, very quickly. I don't want to make Marisa mad. I don't want to make her crazy, Marisa, but everything's fine. Everything is fine. I know that I'm making things very difficult. I'm sorry, Marisa, but everything's really great. Everything's going fine. If not, I'll send you news that things aren't going well, but everything's fine. So we have a lot of topics here on bilateral breathing and on the strokes and on technical features we'll be looking at. But now let's go on with our presentation. So then the fundamental of bilaterality is in symmetry and development, harmonious development of our hemispheres. So now conditional development, the evolution of the body systems, cardiovascular and lungs begins to develop as hormones are giving out signals for the maturity, endocrine maturity of the body, so that now contents can be more diversified. So this evolution of the systems makes the training goals to center on the conditional capacities or physical condition, strength, velocity, speed, flexibility, and resistance. What's more important? I know that flexibility can be worked on all stages because it is a very important component. I remember an anecdote in the Sweden championship where I saw the swimmers. We were having they were swimming underwater a lot in this breaststroke. And I saw the 200-meter swimmers with an incredible flexibility in their ankles, in the butterfly strokes. It was an incredible flexibility. Obviously, this is worked on since they're very young. Flexibility is a content that goes with swimmers throughout their entire age. It's the ugly duckling of physical condition. Many times, coaches leave flexibility to one side, and this is key in shoulders and ankles in butterfly. So what are the star capacities? Resistance and flexibility and speed. Strength is a different methodology with a more global perspective and these contents that we will see later on. But it is necessary in this conditional development stage to be able to reach the maximum aerobic capacity and go above 7 bemols. We must try to reach that capacity and succeed. How can we do this? Well, first we have to go through zone 1, then zone 2, 6 bemols, and zone 3, 7 to 9 is the capacity. To be able to reach this physiological condition, our swimmers should be deep in technique, or our intentions won't be reached. We think that we are working on intensity, but we're not doing so if technique is not well. Yes, so let's continue with the pace, velocity, speed, 0. Yes, I'll try to speak a little slower, or we're going to have no legs later on. Let's give a small pause here and slowly. But we are reaching, and here we have more questions. And now we will come into this phase of competitive development that you were going into when I interrupted you. Sorry. No interruption there. Don't worry, Raul. I must put here a cold bandage on my speed because I speak very passionately and I speak very fast, but I'll try to reduce my speed. So technique here is now focused in the push and propelling. In cognitive, it was hydrodynamics, but now and above water. Now in competitive, it's more underwater, the technique. Here, we must train. First, it was long-term athletes development in training to train, which is so well done. It's such a very well done and beautiful. I love reading also Sotov. He goes beyond the contents. If LTAD, he has a focus. Also, Novakova and other Russian trainers and Grossen, they have a focus on this in their work. But in competitive development, there's a reducing the velocity of growth here, or the speed of human growth here. So we see here where we see that the most important moment of aerobic development is in the higher speed of growth. So here we would have to have seen and complied with all of the functional stages before this and technical quality in the appropriate ages. If now, when I go out to swim and I try to develop aerobic strength, well, this is at this moment, it's like if I tried to put a gallon into a 1 liter bottle. The precision of contents in training is fundamental for coaches, reducing the speed of growth, but this is accompanied by the maturity of the body systems. So technique is in accordance with competitive strategies. And now I mention once again the great champions for 1,500, how they are able to play with their styles in 400 meters or combined 400 meters. They vary the butterfly, maybe the first 50 meters. We are a great rhythm, and then we change the next 50 meters. They have a different technique in accordance with a competitive strategy. This is learned at earlier stages. There's a variety in load application strategies. We start differentiating between maximum force, speed, maximum strength, and resistance force according to time and to speed and to weight. So we diversify these strength contents according to the systems and their maturity, and also how the aerobic strength and power also gives way to non-oxidative and non-aerobic strengths and force. Here we also have a variety then in the load application strategies. There can be focused or not, or cellular loads or not. So at the end of the stages, our coaches start exploring different strategies in load application. Then there is a change into high performance and competitive specialization. This transfer to these stages before we go into high performance with the new systems of training with greater emphasis, for example, inverse trainings. And with this example, I really like to compare swimming to rowing because of the perfect hydrodynamics in rowing, in the rowing schools, and with the extraordinary coordination, especially the 8 rowers, and the coordination in the pre-puberty stage. Since there is not much strength at this moment, at least at the beginning of the pre-puberty stages, the boat of the skull is working hydrodynamically, but in the puberty stage, we see here a boat where we are coordinating now with strength. And in post-puberty, we see the same schools, but in a competition now. So the evolution, the conceptual evolution of technique refers to work first on hydrodynamics and pre-puberty, then work on technique linked to physical condition in puberty stages, and at a third stage, technique linked to competition in post-puberty stages. In order to be able to reach this moment, it's very important to link all that we are speaking with the development of skills, which calls us here today. In which way can we come to a Romanchuk or to a swimmer like Michael Phelps, who dominated all techniques? In which way can we reach this concept, this idea? Now, here we have a very, very important topic, and it's nature. the nature of our swimmer. The nature of our swimmer is a variable which is very difficult to change or turn around. We've seen world champions which have maybe not gone through talent detection programs, but it's a key to understand that there are children who were born to swim. There are children who have been set and configured to be great swimmers. Nevertheless, coaches, we have to work with all swimmers. That's the spirit of teaching, which we hold dear in our hearts. We are coaches, but fundamentally, we are teachers. So, the fact that beyond talent, which is something that we maybe do not manage, kids come to our school, they come to the club. We don't manage talent here. What we do manage here is the way in which we teach, in which we train techniques from the beginning, and then the physical conditions so that that talent can reach high performance. So if we have a great talent, because we can see this from the very first day, not to speed it along, but rather to comply with each one of the stages so that in consequence we can have a swimmer with a quality of Michael Phelps or the long-term swimmers that we see today. So the function of the coaches is to teach. And that teaching is where pedagogical contents related to cognitive development techniques, fundamentals, and principles related to physical condition. It's a methodological programming of the conditional development. All of this together will result in competitive training, which is nothing else but the synthesis of an entire life. So with respect to development of skills, we speak of primary skills and then secondary skills. Primary skills or basic skills are the ones that refer to the swimming schools, and secondary skills are those that we see in the development of base technique and basic learning of the principles and fundamentals. Raul, I have no idea how we are doing on time. I think that we've reached almost 45 minutes. So we're going to have a very short 5-minute break, so that all of you can maybe have some coffee. We are at 8 time zones from early in Miami or earlier in Peru, to places where it's already quite late. So let's take a break here, 5-minute break, so that also we can let Marisa rest a bit, because surely this will be great for her. Marisa, when I meet you I'm going to give you some chocolates when I meet you so that you can maybe say sorry for what I'm speaking now, but it's all fine. It's all perfect. We have many questions here. And those of you who want to put them in the question and answer box, please put them there. Questions as if whether it's very important to teach youth technique of speed swimmers with extended elbows, other questions on swimming for adults, very interesting as to how we observe these processes. All of you English speakers, if you want to make any questions, we can translate them. So also conditional development questions. That cognitive development stage is behind us at this point of techniques. How can we work on cognitive development in adults who start swimming at a later stage to do masters. So we'll think about this later, accepting more questions, and have a 5-minute break. We will then be back in 7 minutes. 7 minutes, and we will be back.
Para retornar, hay muchísimas preguntas.
Okay, so let's get ready to begin. There are many questions, and we will try to summarize at the end with respect to these questions. In some cases, if they have to do with the development here, then we can try to answer. There are many interesting questions. Some don't have a lot to do with the topic of today, but we can answer them.
How to identify if a swimmer is lacking, for instance, kick pulls, and how to do I worked on improving without causing fatigue or injury. We shall go on later with questions of such type when it is more of the exercise that we are addressing. Bueno, muy bien, Tato, hay muchas preguntas. La verdad que...
So, Tato, there's a lot of questions and greetings from a lot of colleagues from Central America and South America. So, let us go on. We have just 43 minutes for this first stage. Poor Marisa. But no, everything is fine. Everything is very well. So, there are just a few questions that are right about the topic we're looking at now. There are some questions on the information, which we will be sending all of these slides to you in English and in Spanish. With respect to some of the questions, such as, well, there's a question, as you were speaking about master swimmers, and we are in the process of development here, how to interact with this cognitive, conditional, and competitive development, how to link when we are with a person who is already of an adult age, all of this cognitive development, maybe they had not received, how to compensate then the phases that were not developed at an early age, how to compensate at an adult age if they didn't have lessons as young people. I want to tell you something about this. And free time, in my free time, which is when I finish, I have two groups. In the morning, those that get up very early, the university students, first the young ones, and then more adult ones, older ones. And I'm training another master who is 91 years old. He's the grandfather of one of my other swimmers and says, I am training for the World Championship myself. My student said, can you train my grandfather? I don't have a lot of time, but I said, yes, let's do it, because I'm passionate about something that is new, which is training a 91-year-old person. The first thing I did was, of course, to start studying. And I saw There's a lot of studies, research on athletes beyond 90 years old, a lot of studies. What are the characteristics of a person with such longevity? What are the answers? The integrated, comprehensive answers to training. So I'm learning so much with Nino, my 91-year-old swimmer, who will compete in Fukuoka in the 90 to 95-year-old. But I've learned so much with him. It's very gratifying for me to be with him every day. He's a doctor, physician. He belongs to the Peruvian Association of Diabetes. He is very intelligent, very lucid. So it's a passion for me to be able to train him. What am I doing? Working on his technique. Working on technique. What are we doing? We are looking at the best turns for him, how we can stretch out the stroke, find his kick. So what I want to tell you, what I've told everyone, is that I'm really happy to be training a senior. I do it in my free time because I love to do it. I've studied a lot to be able to train him. But technique can be learned at any age. This is what I found. At any age, you can learn technique, which brings us to the topic of training technique at younger ages. When I do this, I don't have to teach basic when they're younger or more adults. So the training time is finite, 2 hours, where I have to choose what the training contents are, which will take me to the results. If the person doesn't know how to swim, then I have to take those 2 hours to teach him to swim. And this takes away from conditional development or competitive development, which would correspond in a training for championships. But when we come to masters sports, and this is for triathletes too, what is most important in master sports is for people to swim well, for people to be able to master breathing and balance, to have training related to the possibilities of their own age. But fundamentally, the main feature of master sports is technique. And the technical possibilities, what methodology allows me in with respect of the age of my athlete. So technique, that's the master's training. And when they're younger, then there can be more condition context. And then there could be more technique and stroke content. But Nico Santo, a swimmer I love, a wonderful young athlete that I was able to work with, Nicolas Santos, who at 41 years old was a world champion in butterfly in Melbourne in December, 41 years old, 50 meters butterfly champion. I worked with him. But let's see, for example, LeBron James, Orlando worked with him. LeBron James, 36 years old. And everyone compares to him. Messi, 36 years old, and still this gold soccer. Fernando Alonso, 41 years old, Formula One. So today, longevity is part of sports. We have to respond to expectations, and we speak about professionality. That is being professional, studying, understanding that training at different ages, masters, have the very same characteristics of training for pre-puberty and puberty stages, because the nature of factor of nature is present in methodology. But we should train technique at all ages. Triathletes. I see triathletes who don't swim well. Why do they need resistance or strength and run an entire day if they don't swim well? Just learn to swim well. But anyway, another question that's very interesting from all of the questions we have here, more than 30. Klinkvink, whom
desarrollo condicional. Dicho en otras palabras, estos tres procesos que vos venís describiendo.
So these three processes that you are describing, cognitive, conditional, and competitive development, the transition, we understand is consecutive, but they overlap sometimes, one and the other. So when do I know that I'm going from cognitive development to beginning, let's say, conditional development? What features and aspects should I look at in order to assess this transition? The intensity of the series, zone 2, intensity, higher intensity in zone 2, higher intensity in zone 3. So in zone 2, my swimmer maintains his technique and complies with methodological requirements of the zone. Then I can go on to zone 3, maintaining the technique. If not, I cannot. If my swimmer cannot comply with the requirements of zone 1, swimming well, good aerobic mass, good turns, mastering subaquatics, mastering the recovery and recall. If in 400, 800 meters, my swimmer can't swim with good turns, bilateral breathing, subaquatic correctly, 3 or 4 kicks, and good breakout. If my swimmer does not rotate in the backstroke, no sensibility, hands going everywhere, and not working in a balanced and symmetrical manner, then he cannot progress to the next stage. Technical maturity will tell me to go on to conditional development or beyond. Okay? So technical maturity, keeping the technique in the different series. Each of the zones has a methodology, right? Which is volume, what distance, what pause, and what intensity. These 4 elements are what makes up the density and intensity of these training series. If I have a series of high volume, long distance, short pauses, low intensity, and my swimmer can master this technically, then he can go on to another zone with lesser distance, higher intensity. But if they don't dominate the technique in the previous zone, then they can go on. Or my humble suggestion would be, don't advance him to the next zone. It's technical maturity what will make him her or him able to go to the next intensity. So let's go on, because we have greetings from so many people from all regions in the Americas. We're so happy to have you here with us. Thank you. He said, thanks for the answer. We have questions from colleagues from Cochabamba, Bolivia, Mexico, Peru, from so many places. We can't read all questions, but let's go on. Well, right now, we will go on to the swimming academy. We will go back to our academy teachers, swimming academy teachers. The swimming school teacher or coach has to be a teacher that has been trained. He must or she must know about swimming. She must have a lot of capacity for interaction with the students, and to the point where if I have to put my best coaches, I would put them in the younger ages. That's where I put my best coaches. That is the point of entry to success. The capacity to linking the swimming school with the first stages of the development of swimmers. So let's divide skills into primary or basic, which are those on which we will be learning to swim, and then secondary or complex skills, which are those that are linked to styles and techniques which are performed with efficiency. So the first of these, what are the three key elements which I insist on in my swimming school teachers? Trust and safety, perceptive development, and coordinative development. With respect to trust and safety or security, remember that the paradigm in planning is the didactic paradigm. That means the professor has to have a goal for each lesson, develop the content, have a methodology, know what elements will be used, how he will be or she will be using the space, and how it will assess the lesson. Sadly, physical education has lots of capacity for evaluation or assessment. This monitoring through assessment are so important in the didactic paradigm. So it is a key for the teacher to plan. And here is where the didactic paradigm steps in. The didactic or teaching paradigm is a behavioral focus and approach. For teachers in physical education, this could be sacrilegious, but learning the motor gestures has to do with mechanics, which are different from concept processes, conceptualization processes, mental processes, let's say. This is a different approach. When I'm learning to drive and I have an automatic mechanical car, I have to, or a mechanical car, not automatic, I have to think about the clutch and the accelerator so that the car doesn't stop on me and stall on me. So I'm thinking about learning how to start without stalling. I'm not thinking about global warming or anything like that. I'm thinking about just one motor. I have to do it so I don't stall. So the behavior focus, which is a pedagogical current, a teaching and learning current, and has been taken out of physical education, but it's very enriching in programming, learning for swimming. This behavioral focus is focusing on directional and operational objectives, direction, which is the purpose of the teacher, and operational, which are those behaviors, conducts in motor skills, which are successive and will then configurate from a simple feature going to a complex gesture. And these operational focuses are the methodological sequencing of our planning, and planning the classes based on then on the characteristics of the group. This is another characteristic of trust and security. Safety in the environment. Kids must feel safe, not only in the water environment, but also in the general environment of the entire pool. If we look at evolutionary psychology of 4 or 5 years, panics in stage, so this freezing on stage is a very important element in psychology. Panic attacks on stage. They must feel then safe. This stage fright that can happen. That means that students must feel safe in the entire pool, in the entire environment, inside the water. How does this safety translate into the swimmer being able to hold on to the edge of the pool with all safety and trust. If they feel they trust the teacher, the pool, then swimmers will then go after gestures and movements that are a higher challenge. And therefore, methodological functions must always focus on what is it that the swimmer feels and how can we potentialize the methodology for that feeling of safety. When we speak about perceptive development, we are speaking of questions which have to do with concepts of psychomotor skills and neuroscience, which is the way in which each one of us perceives our own body, the body scheme in the water environment, the sensations which arise from the relation of the body in the water, the famous feel the water, which always we hear about this in all world championships, international championships, feel the water, feel the water. In the warm-up, we say, that is to feel the water. Developing the senses must be from the very first stages of teaching. A swimmer must structure their own body scheme within the water. All of those sensations contribute to knowing how the swimmer feels in a different medium, in a different environment. Exercises related to balance, static and dynamic, which results in, maybe for Mariana, Marisa will be different to translate. And this has to do with the body and the alignment. It arises from this. Balance will allow the position of the body and the alignment. And it will also allow for laterality, which translates into the symmetry of styles. As we are able to teach our swimmers to perceive their own body within the water and develop the sensitivity of water from the very first stages of the swimming schools, then we will be able to have a lot of steps that we would have won over and succeeded, because technique never ends. So what happens if in the next FINA championship they decide, or FINA Congress decides, that breaststroke swimmers can do subaquatic swimming in breaststroke, then we will have to teach that to our breaststroke swimmers, subaquatic swimming. So technique is not something that is learned at one time and that is never learned again. The evolution of technique is a permanent evolution of content in training, and therefore it has to be a basic content in the swimming school, where the teachers, the professors, the swimming coaches will teach the swimmers to feel the water, perceive their bodies in balance in a natural way as part of the pedagogical process, teaching process. Another of the key elements is that the class environment has to be dynamic, interactive, fun, enjoyable, because this will develop a love for swimming. Will the swimmer want to come back? Does he want to come back, or she? Have they learned, the swimmers? Do they want to return? These three questions that we were speaking about. What did he learn? Does he want to come back? Exactly. These three things are basic for swimmers. There's trust and security. What did they learn? What was learned? This comes from the didactics of the methods of teaching. Did the child have fun? This comes from interaction. Does the child want to return, or the swimmer? This comes from building love for swimming. So the three pedagogical concepts of science of education, we will see that in pedagogy is the development of values, of attitudes, and interactions. These concepts are the framework of reference for the swimming teacher. We must teach technique. We must teach to swim. Yes, of course, that's the center. But the perimeter is developing love for swimming, creating an environment for the class, which is so great that the swimmers want to return. So coordinative development. Look at this photograph. It has a lot to do with my concept of the methodology of teaching the natural human style, the doggy style of swimming, we would say. In the 70s, end of the 70s decade, there was a publication in Argentina by a teacher who made a trend, a current in teaching of swimming, Juan Carlos Piel, who was the first book I read where I learned how to teach swimming. This book said that coordinative development came from the natural human swimming style, doggy style swimming, which is the consequence. What is important here? The class then has to be active. The lesson has to be very active, the swimming lesson. Sometimes I see the teachers, swimmers just standing up and they all dive in, lined up, dive into the pool. My son is a pilot. My son is a commercial pilot. And when he was learning, he flew a PA-11, a very old Piper plane. And the instructor would say, the plane on the floor. Why? Because he practiced landings and the same thing. We'd say, the kid in the water, kid to the water, swimming. Kids in the water, swimming, in the water. And that is the great challenge. If the pool is very deep, then the methodology changes. So first, environment, propulsion, floating. If a child can stand in the pool feel safe standing in the pool, the sequence is environment and then floating and then propulsion. What do I mean? As soon as possible, a child must start swimming, must start coordinating the coordinating style. It's all about coordination of movements at that time. Let's not worry so much about the teaching concepts, but that at a second stage until a child starts swimming. First, in the water, learning from simple to complex is the learning method. And we starting from an aligned position of the body, always. This is a photograph that shows us that you had hair then. That's what it shows us. Your hair was still kind of black. Well, yeah, this is a photograph with my children, Sebastian and Maleri. Maleri was 3 then. Sebastian was 5. And look, this is the idea. This is the style of swimming, learning, coordinating by coordinating. Learning, coordinating. Yes. What about a friend? Raul, you made me forget. Remember when I had that hair. So the development of skills, the didactics, the teaching methods. Look at her style here. Look at her stroke forward, how she finishes, the action of the legs, the head in the water. So how is this all in order? The order of the swimming school begins with technique. From technique, then the operational goals, starting with simple behaviors to more complex behaviors and movements, and they're accumulative from simple to complex. So we begin with technique and we start planning backwards in a way that, as the soccer coaches, let's say, now that Messi is in the Miami Inter, I'm starting to say soccer instead of football, but as technical directors in soccer, think about forming a team so that the ball can reach number 9. The same way in swimming schools, I start developing the goals, thinking about a swimmer that has a complex technique, that reaches a complex technique. So it's breaking down complex skills into more simple parts and learning each part separately, teaching each part separately before we integrate them all into a complete skill. That is called synthetic analytic synthetic. But this is a process after the planning of the classes. We must plan the learning goals and the context of learning, the methodology of the class, and of course, the assessment of those goals and mastery of those goals. If we sit down with our swimmers and explain to them what we will do in the lesson, we quickly review what are the motor behaviors, motor conducts we want to see, that we want them to achieve, and the challenges for this lesson. Then the swimmer will have an idea predisposed to teaching, learning them. If we then assess the lesson for the swimmers to know what they did well and what the next challenge is, then this leads us to a much more important comprehension of the teaching methodology, and then developing skills based on the aligned body. First in this doggy style with head out, then head in the water, but this will mark alignment of the body, which we will continue from there. A 50-meter swimmer must not breathe a lot during those 50 meters. But there are there are swimmers who do breathe a bit more. When we do the kinematic analysis of a 50-meter race, we will see that the breathing marks is a strong factor in the inertia of movement. If I teach alignment, if I don't teach alignment of the body, then the risk of break through this breathing is reduced if I teach the alignment, because my swimmer will be aligned and breathing on the axis. I need for my swimmer to be aligned in his body, be well aligned, and for the breathing to be almost not perceptible. So I need to work on this from the swimming school. The position of the body, the head will be guiding all the rest of the body. When I studied physical education, we had to do a Morino skill in parallel in the sawmill, turning all the way back with our arms and our legs sticking out. But if our head was not well positioned, we would hit our legs or our arms when we did these sawmill turns, windmill turns. And there is where we learned that the head is the rudder of the body. So from the very first moment, the alignment of the body is what all learning is based on for the athlete, a horizontal position based on the position of the head. And the horizontal position in this doggy style swimming, then we go on to a vertical swimming, from this horizontal to vertical, because we are now floating and moving in a horizontal manner. In a vertical manner, we are swimming. The second is to put our head in the water. We continue doggy style with our head in the water. Then we see that the coordination of strokes and kicks begins to be naturally in a 6 times. 6 kick, 6 times. And then we will go to a global crawl. We don't move our head. and we transfer and we invite our swimmers to then make the stroke over the water. So this is how we transfer from one to the other. I once taught skiing on water. They learned, and when they were 3, my children, and that is very difficult. When you're skiing on mountain, that is very, very difficult. When we teach swimming, these are simple concepts. First, keep our head still and our body in the water and horizontal. So these are the last 5 minutes of the time we have now. Of course, we will then continue on Saturday, though what we cannot see today. But all of those who came in, nobody has left. Everyone's still in the class. In the last minutes, we had a few colleagues coming in from many, many regions of the Americas, many colleagues from all of our American countries, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Puerto Rico, many people who are sending us messages. We would like to tell you the importance of you being here. It's very important for us. So let's continue this comprehensive, and then maybe this is a fantastic graph of integrating all of these concepts, bringing together all the concepts in precise exercises. I think this is what is most important of what we could take with us today and what we will then be presenting on Saturday. It's a very difficult schedule. Today, 29th of June, is the day of St. Peter. It's a holiday for us. Lima is a city on the coast. So people here, they go away. Today is the fisherman's holiday, St. Peter also. And that's why I have a free day. But usually this is my training day. Many people today have been training, and that's why they're just coming to join at this moment. But such is life. What can we do? But anyway, to just explain this to you, what you're looking at up on the screen, what I'd like to explain, the leg position. Someone was telling me about what is the connection here. First, we must correct the body position. Then we correct the leg action, which is very, very important. Do not modify the alignment of the body. Do not change the alignment of the body with kick. Then we work on the stroke action, arm action, so that it does not break connection with the leg movement or misalign the body. And then breathing to take it with our mouth out and then in, so that we can incorporate this into the style. And then coordination, all of this, the position of the body, leg action, arm action, breathing has to be coordinated into efficiency. When we speak about secondary or complex skills, then we start out with the position of the body. Then we go to leg action. Leg action has this double function, propelling us, pushing us, and stabilizing the body. That stabilizing factor maintains the body position, and also it has to grow and be hydrodynamic in our kick. So leg action is stabilizing and propelling, because we really have to train kicking because of this stroke or arm action in a global moment, globally first, and then more technique arises from, or the starting point is the premise of not altering, changing the position of the body in the water and not interrupting the action, continuous action of the legs, not interrupting the kick. Having these three things, we will now have global crawl, global freestyle, global crawl, and then we work on the breathing, and there we start on technical coordination for any of the styles after this. The elemental learning of the fundamentals are the starts, the turns, and the finishes. We also have to teach subaquatic swimming. Subaquatic swimming is the fifth style or the first challenge. In short pools, in butterfly, breaststroke, or crawl, we swim subaquatic and 40% over. So subaquatic swimming is a key element also. It's another style, let's say. So now I'm at your disposal for questions. As we said, we will not be able to do the questions because we are at the end. Also, we've come to the end for our translators' abilities, but some questions were already answered. There are so many questions too, more personal or specific questions. The wish for Panama Aquatics for these webinars, what Panam desires is to make you know how important your work is in swimming schools, in clubs, in national teams or high performance teams. All of you are such an important part of the community for swimming. This is what Panama Aquatics wants to let you know. There are always opportunities for talent to be able to stand out, have an opportunity for talent, have an opportunity for athletes to become important. We don't have to think about all of these important sports centers and say, if I don't have all of these pools and sports centers and structures and facilities, I can't make any advancement. We believe that with these webinars will bring you closer to these sports processes and make all of you be able to take advantage of this knowledge. We know that in Potosí, in Bolivia, we've had all these greetings from all of you. How not can we remember? I once ran 1,500 meters in La Paz and I said, forget it. Altitude in Bolivia really made that difficult. So greetings for all of our colleagues from Chile, everywhere, from Puerto Rico, La Paz. Also, our English speakers can also write in their greetings in the question and answer box. English speakers can write there too, send greetings. Thank you so much. Some of the questions were answered, but I'm going to choose one question for our closing. It's a comment by Guillermo Soto Cuadra. Said this has been a very interesting webinar discussion. We hope there will be more to have all of this learning. It's more of a comment than a question from Peru. And a question to close. I'll choose one from the so many questions we've received. And it has to do with this idea of learning, bilateral breathing, many questions. I think that you have any question is fine. It's about, I can't read everything, but precisely one comment by Luz Bermudez. With respect to pedagogical teaching processes, I like what you remarked about trainers, coaches must lead the teaching process of their schools or academies and never forget about leading that. Luz Mari from Colombia says that many times there are not educators are put into this position of teaching swimming, and that is sad. Yes. I love high performance, of course. I love training university swimmers, but I also love development of young youthful competitive swimmers, but for me, it's a great passion for a coach, a head coach, to design the programs where everyone knows that they're part of a greater goal, greater objective, and their position, their function, their work is so important, determining for swimmers to be able to become great champions or become great athletes or become swimmers who enjoy the sea, the lake, swimming in rivers, beyond even competing. But all of these three trends has a common factor, and it is there must be love for swimming and a true good technique. So the design of long-term programs must include the swimming schools. And for a head coach, this is a great challenge, because not only does the design of the objectives and the design of contents is included, but also the development and training of the coaches themselves, of the professors themselves within the clubs. It's fundamental to have meetings among these coaches and professors, and the training of professors with the master coach, and reflecting on their practice, on their work, and reflecting and adjusting long-term processes. So it's a huge challenge for a very passionate trainer in high performance to be able to develop these long-term processes and helping their colleagues to feel part, an active, very active part of these goals and fundamental parts of these long-term teaching processes of constructing these goals. So with this very deep remark by Orlando Moccagatta, we're going to be now closing today's session. All of you have the link to join us next Saturday and to join there will be more practical elements, more practical and technique elements. More than 60 comments here in the question box. Greetings to everybody. Thank you, Panama Aquatics. Thank you, Orlando. Thank you, Marisa, for her translation. There we can see her face here. Everything's fine. And we will see you then on Saturday. So that's it for today. And good night to all of you.